Hello, Laurence. It's really a pleasure meeting you today on our videocast.
Good afternoon. Hello. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Laurence, actually, I'd like to discuss today the new report that came out from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And I think you're probably the best person to put this in context of what's happening in the UK biotech scene and how your organization is participating in this dynamic market and what we can expect in the future from the market in the UK. And also, some trends, some personal opinions. I hope you're fine with that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. So perhaps I start just say a couple of words about myself. Laurence Barker. I'm a partner here at SV Health Investors based in London, and I focus on the Dementia Discovery Fund franchise. So this is a set of funds that focus to invest in early biotechnology companies exploring novel mechanisms to tackle dementia. Perhaps you could argue one of the greatest medical challenges of today, with so many folks suffering from these diseases and very few medicines that really benefit patients today. So we've got a set of funds where we're looking to both invest in and build companies to tackle these diseases, leveraging the science both from the UK and around the world.
First of all, it's really, I agree 100% that this is probably one of the most challenging areas because, to my knowledge, it's just so prone to clinical trial failures, for example. Delivering therapeutics is extremely hard. But on the other hand, the more harder it is, the more opportunities it brings for the patients, for the businesses. So I guess it's a really great area to be as well.
We've been very fortunate in the last few years to see several very positive changes occur. If you start from the fundamental science, I think the innovation that's occurring has really accelerated through novel technologies being applied, and that's allowed us to identify new companies to build and invest in, to take some of those greatest insights or latest insights into the field of neuroscience, and particular neurodegeneration, to build companies focused on new biological targets and new pathways outside of what's been pursued historically, and gives us a chance to explore biology that we may understand from other disease areas, and we're now starting to understand it in neuroscience, and gives us a chance, to your point, about increasing the likelihood of success. I think the other two areas which has helped us see investing in neurodegeneration in a different light is the fact that we've seen recent successes. There's been recently products approved which do provide some benefit to patients, and we're fortunate to see them finally make it through and actually now been on the market to treat Alzheimer's disease. That does leave a huge unmet medical need behind them to be able to offer and develop products to help in other ways and to tackle diseases that are not currently addressed. And I think what we've learned there is that with the acceleration of some of these clinical programs, regulators have seen the unmet medical need being so significant that they've supported accelerated development and approval. And this, of course, as an investor, is attractive because it meant that with less capital and a shorter amount of time, clinical studies can be run and products can reach patients in the market in a shorter period of time with greater success. And that's meant that this field has really gained additional interest from the broader industry, both on the pharmaceutical side, but also other investors who we need to work with us to invest in these companies and programs for success.
Coming back to the report by the Tony Blair Institute, the report is called "A New National Purpose: Leading the Biotech Revolution." It's kind of ambitious, I think. And given the Dementia Discovery Fund's pioneering role in dementia-focused venture capital, can you maybe share how the fund's strategy kind of aligns with the urgent call for innovation in biotech, and particularly as we discussed in this very challenging area in the UK and globally.
Yes, sure. So maybe some examples will be helpful here,
Yep.
and some specific points to note. So our strategy has very much been to work with the scientific innovators to not just invest in companies that exist, but actually to stimulate the environment by building new companies. And we've done this in areas where there has not been existing programs and drug discovery efforts to date, but actually to expand that early pipeline. So, for example, from our first fund, more than half the companies we invested in were companies that we created. So this creates, new opportunities for other groups to invest in, whether they're UK investors or global investors. We attract many investors from abroad and additional foreign capital, but also allows, of course, companies to be built here and more scientists employed. What that's done is we've leveraged a lot of the groups here who have fantastic science. Obviously, the universities and their environments, but the UK has supported the establishment of specific groups for areas like this with high unmet medical need. The Dementia Research Institute is one that's worth noting, which is a group that was set up about the same time as the DDF, with a significant capital commitment enabled by the government to advance research just in this field. And they've had huge impact in terms of stimulating that and putting the UK at the forefront of dementia research. There are groups who've supported the translational science out of these groups, charities and others who've come together. Alzheimer's Research UK, one of our investors, has a drug discovery set of institutes at 3 big universities to accelerate these. So these are groups that the UK supports, the UK environment supports to accelerate this innovation. I think it's worth also calling out what they're doing to support venture funds here as well, with groups like British Patient Capital and the British Business Bank to put more risk capital to work via managers, again, to take this early stage innovation and accelerate it, thereby stimulating the UK environment. And yes, all of this could be more to tackle these problems and diseases, but I think the components that are being put in place are a fantastic start and really put the UK at the forefront of translating this innovation into potential therapeutic products and other forms of products for that matter as well.
So, like expectedly, and what I just heard from you, that's collaboration and establishing these different kind of pillars for the market, for the advancement, and collaborating between different organizations is probably the key. And by the way, that's according to the report, which suggests that creation of that laboratory by design and the NHS data trust to kind of spur further innovation. But maybe you can give a little bit of the example, let's say, for the external partners which might be coming to the United Kingdom market for the investment or opening the business. And is there any frame for integrating those within the kind of global strategy? How does the government and how does all this bodies build this infrastructure for new partners to join and support your community and also the global fight with the diseases?
So thank you. I think this is a good opportunity to give some specific examples of how we all leverage partnerships, and whether that's capital we're looking to bring in, whether it's capabilities through partners with large pharmaceutical organizations, whether they're based here in the States or other locations, in order to accelerate the innovation. So we've built, from our portfolio, we've built a range of companies here in the UK. And we did that, back to the point I made before, to leverage the science, the scientific underpinnings. But we can't do it without venture investors from here, but also overseas. And several of those companies have attracted lead investors from, for example, the States, because the science is so strong here. The management teams and innovators are strong here as well. So one of the most recent companies of mine that raised almost £50 million in a Series A Astronautics, a company focused on the role of astrocytes, a certain specific cell type in these diseases and advancing small molecule programs. They had 3 or 4 investors they brought in from the States and central, the European continent, in order to support companies here. And why do we keep the companies here? Well, that's because the partners at the research level are here, as well as the science itself. So investors are willing to come across. But in addition, we have companies like Ceravance with their platform technology based in Cambridge, and they've struck partnerships with big pharma organizations who've been willing to come here and deploy their capital. And a year and a half ago, they did a deal with Merck to support neuroinflammatory mechanisms for Alzheimer's disease, and they were willing to deploy their capital here as well. So these are different types of groups who will bring their capital to the UK. And the environment's very supportive of that, whether that's through R&D tax credits or a very conducive environment for employment here, means that we can build teams and have people invest as opposed to having to take the companies offshore.
Mm-hmm.
So they're partnerships both at the scientific level, at the investment level, and at the pharma commercialization level, all of which we leverage across our companies very heavily.
Yeah, it seems like a really welcoming environment. I've been to London many times, and I've also visited Cambridge. And actually, I was kind of impressed by the level of scientific, infrastructure, community, all that kind of stuff. But like Cambridge, London, Oxford, those are kind of world-renowned places, and probably on everybody's mind. But can you outline maybe some hotspots in the UK, in maybe other areas, other growing biotech hubs, or for that matter, science hubs in general, that might be interesting for the investment, for the newcomers, or for just business expansion by major corporations and kind of stuff?
Sure, but very happy to do that. What I would say, if I reflect on our UK portfolio of companies, then they are by and large based across the southeast. So whether that's in the Oxford area, Cambridge area, or right here in London. And that's often because there is the infrastructure, the investors are close, and one has to also be close to where your teams and management are. But that's not to say that other areas don't offer wonderful science and opportunity to leverage that. So, for example, one of the companies we're invested in, Amphista Therapeutics, they are now based in Cambridge, but they started life in Dundee because of the strength of science, and this key scientific founder is based there, and at the beginning built the company there. But as they expanded and needed a larger team and more types of team skill sets, then they couldn't fulfill that easily in Scotland. And as they expanded, they moved the company further south so they could tap into a greater and deeper pool of management. But I want to emphasize that through working with, and we spend time in different areas, whether it's Scotland or up in the Midlands, looking at opportunities, then we often find great science. We sometimes invest in companies in those areas too, but more often than not, as they grow, they move to areas where they can be supported. And that's, not always, but frequently, to your point, in the southeast. And certainly today, the majority of our portfolio is spread there, although we do have a company based in Northern Ireland, for example, as well. So it's not just limited to that.
Well, I know at least one company which is very famous in the AI for drug discovery space is Exscientia. I don't remember if they focus on the brain disorders or the CNS diseases.
They do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Accenture.
Yeah. Well, my next question is probably on it's the favorite question everywhere in the biotech conferences now, and everybody's talking about that artificial intelligence. So I think it's considering the complexity, the intrinsically complex nature of this kind of diseases like CNS diseases and everything that is related to complex multigenic, so to speak, diseases. It goes without saying that things like holistic modeling, if I may call it, are going to revolutionize the way we see those diseases, how they progress, how they develop, what's the reasons, what are the reasons behind those. And artificial intelligence, of course, allows to combine different data sets to analyze things in dynamical fashion, like, for example, not just a static picture of something, but actually developing process. And for that matter, a lot of data sets are needed, and they are being collected. And as far as I know, the UK is pioneering the genomics project. I don't remember the exact name of the project, but it's the big genomics initiatives, which is supposed to provide a lot of big data for modeling. And to put that all in context, AI means big data, and it seems like it's happening actively in the United Kingdom as well. So maybe you can kind of outline a little bit about this major development and how it influences the dementia disease and other related areas.
Sure. Very happy to. And what I would say at the outset is the use of AI or machine learning and it is a key tool in many different ways for both the sector and our companies to make more rapid and better informed advancements. There's no question it's having a huge positive impact. Let me give you some examples, both at the holistic in the sector and then in our companies themselves. So I think you were making reference indirectly to Our Future Health, which is an endeavor recently where they're collecting samples from as large a number of individuals as possible. They're up to more than 1 million, again, to understand at the population level many different potential drivers or indicators of disease. There is an initiative by the UK Biobank, which has been going on for some time, and they have more than 500,000 genomes of people have identified. And it's not just limited to that, they're also collecting data, a lot of data, on other endpoints and parameters from these folks, so they can better understand and track both their genetics, their lifestyle, their contributing factors over time. So these are longitudinal data sets to how people might develop disease. And from that work, then organizations can better understand how certain diseases might come to pass, whether they're genetically driven, they're driven by the environment, or a combination thereof, and help better inform us when we come to think about developing therapeutics for some of these diseases. So these data sets become extraordinarily powerful as we look to both understand targets, programs, and the development of therapeutics, but also as we think about identifying the right patients to test these programs on ultimately. Because we talked previously about developing a drug for, Alzheimer's disease. That's like saying developing it for cancer. But what we mean is a very specific form of cancer which does a certain thing and has a certain genetic driver. And we have the same approach we need to take for Alzheimer's disease. And we can select those patients in a manner that's much more thoughtful and data-driven by tapping into some of these resources like UK Biobank and eventually things like Our Future Health. Specifically, I was just going to go on and then to talk about specifically in the companies. We have several companies within our portfolio who use AI to analyze very large data sets they've developed. So one company does takes human tissue. These are human tissue from brains of individuals who've suffered from these different forms of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, for example, and they analyze the expression of genes and proteins within different states and different cell types, and that generates a huge amount of data, which then is interrogated to find new targets to go after diseases. So they look for differential expression in the disease state versus the healthy state, and they
Mhm.
look for what's controlling, and that is the basis on which they do a lot of their target discovery work. And that requires enormous AI capability within these organizations to do. And much of that work is proprietary, so they do it in-house, and they've built teams of experts in AI data modeling, well, manipulation and modeling. Likewise, we have another company, Alchemab Therapeutics, that looks to identify antibodies. These are naturally developed antibodies within certain individuals who do not develop disease. So these are protective antibodies, and they look to identify differences between people of a certain age who've developed Alzheimer's disease and a certain folks who have not, and whether there are distinctive antibody subsets that protect them from disease. And as you can imagine, you sequence those antibody repertoires that generates huge amounts of data that needs to be compared in many different ways. And that's been a very successful approach, which is an AI heavy data analysis in order to develop novel antibodies there for these diseases. So they're just two companies, Alchemab and Ceravance, that are doing that in a very data heavy manner, leveraging their own data, but also third party data like UK Biobank and others in order to better inform the development of these programs for Alzheimer's disease and others. So the use of AI in our sector, and I've just given you two examples, there are many others, is fundamental now to the type of analysis and the type of data manipulation required, I think, to advance these types of technologies and programs.
I have a little bit of a provocative question, maybe. In my opinion,
Right.
yeah, in my opinion, based on what I have studied about the industry, based on what you're giving examples of the companies that are generating this kind of data to advance the field. In my opinion, data is now a more important factor in the whole thing than the actual development of the algorithms. Because in my opinion, the algorithms are powerful enough to guide something already today. And what is lacking is comprehensive, multimodal, very high quality data about many, many things in biology. And so I believe the next rounds, so to speak, of the next wave of market innovation and everything is going to be about data, how to generate data, and this is what will give competitive edge to companies. And by the way, why I think so is because some AI companies that started like 5-7 years ago as AI drug discovery, they start investing heavily into building this, robotized labs, this automatic data generation facilities, because they understand, okay, algorithm is cool, but without data, it will not get very far. So
I don't think that's particularly controversial, because you could just imagine at the most simple level, if you have very poor quality data in the beginning, you're probably going to get the wrong decisions or the wrong conclusions out the back. And certainly, as we look at the kind of biological samples from which our original data is generated, frequently that's DNA, RNA, protein sequencing, structural data. If we don't understand where that tissue and that data comes from, right? What is the source of it? Then the conclusions we'll come to in the data sets we generate will not be informative, or they will be informative incorrectly. So I would agree with you entirely. For us, the quality and understanding, biologically speaking, and I'm a biologist, so maybe I'm biased, of what goes in to start with is critical to get right. And if we start mixing up samples between someone with one form of dementia versus another and mixing them, then actually the conclusions we get to will not enable us to do our drug discovery and development correctly. So the emphasis on sample quality, on understanding where it comes from, and the data that goes in is critical. And we spend a lot more time discussing and debating getting that right, and not on how we're manipulating it. How we're manipulating it is less the focus. If you get that piece right, it will help. I think the other piece you didn't mention, but I do want to add is, the more we can share data from clinical studies and clinical experiences across these diseases and amongst or between players, the more we as a field will understand better how to do this, and that will enable everyone to succeed. faster. And there are a number of initiatives to do that, which is great. But I think if we did that more, we would accelerate our understanding of drug discovery and development, particularly in dementia. But this applies, of course, more broadly across innovation.
Thank you. I think one of the initiatives comes to my head is the Melody project, the partnership based on federated learning. This kind of where pharma companies came together to have the model, centralized model, trained on everybody's data without actually sharing the data, and so they can preserve the IP, intellectual property, but then the wisdom of that data can actually be shared across the parties. That's probably one of the ways.
Yeah, yes, there's obviously a balance. If it's proprietary data, then sure, that needs to be owned and controlled by an organization. But there's a lot that can be shared that is not yet being shared, which is not particularly proprietary, but would enable the field. And we're getting there, but we're not there yet. Sure.
Well, my next question is, regarding the future, a little bit about the future, considering all these trends in the data acquisition, considering that more and more data becomes available, considering that AI is actually becoming very mature technology and it can literally move the needle here and there, what do you think is going to happen next? Like, what's the big discovery that might be, wild guess, but might be happening on the horizon?
So I think in our field, the big breakthroughs are going to come when we understand what drug combinations are going to have the greatest benefit. And the reason I mentioned that here is that this will also come back to an understanding of exactly what each patient, what their profile is in terms of the type of disease, the state of disease. And that's data, again, that's data manipulation. And if we can understand that, and we can understand how to use drugs in combination ultimately in a way that we've been successful in oncology to do that with complementary or synergistic mechanisms, then I think we will have the opportunity to have a much bigger impact on disease. Any single mechanism is not going to suffice. We're going to need to use combinations, but working out who benefits from it and what the right combinations are going to require data sets, they're going to require longitudinal data, and they're going to require new drugs that we use in combination. And that's where the field has to move to in the foreseeable future. Yes, we need individual agents to work, and we've been fortunate enough to have a couple approved, but ultimately they're not going to suffice. We're going to need combinations. We're going to need clever combinations, and that's where we've got to go. And that's going to require a lot of understanding of the different profiles, biomarkers, and other that patients have. So that's where we've got to go in the future.
Well, very interesting, and actually it mirrors the opinion on several other key opinion leaders I've been talking to previously, that this combination, they were referring specifically to oncology, but I agree with you that it's going to make an impact on many other areas.
We take the learnings from the field of oncology where that's proven to be very powerful, and this idea of precision medicine, which is the term we use for this. And now precision neuroscience is the way we view the world, and it has to be. We've learned from the way oncology is developed, and that is the future. Precision neuroscience is the way we will develop, novel drugs with significant efficacy that will benefit specific patients. There's no question.
Precision neuroscience, that the keyword I will specifically outline from this interview.
Excellent. And that's exactly what it needs to be. Yes.
Yeah. My final question for today is this: the report that we started our conversation with, basically what it says. It calls for the UK to lead the biotech revolution. Very ambitious. But what do you think the next steps that UK has to take as the country, as the collective system of forces, companies, organizations, to secure this global leadership in this ever-changing market? Because a very competitive market, new countries come into play. The Asia is rising quite significantly in the life sciences sector. So how to maintain that leadership and how to expand it? What do you think?
So plays a strong role already for its size, right? We need to remember, we're not the size of the States. We play a strong role already. I think there's 2 or 3 areas that UK could continue to build on. I think carving out and have focused areas like in the field of dementia, where I think people would argue it plays an outsized role already, which is fantastic, in order to attract talent, and we've got to be open-minded to allow talent to come in from wherever it is. I think it already does well on capital to invest in companies. I think it would do better if it could support more venture capital locally, and that they found a way to bring in capital into venture funds locally and not just have so much reliance on offshore money to build these companies. I think at the moment it does a good job with small companies, but as they get larger, capital for scale is scarce sometimes, and one has to look offshore, not necessarily to move the company, but to source that capital offshore. That's going to be key in order to do it. And then I think the last piece is to support a regulatory framework to allow more clinical studies to occur here, and to enable access to patients under the NHS structure is going to be key to allow companies to do more of their work here, both at the clinical level, in addition to the drug discovery. So there's a few key areas, and it revolves around people, talent, capital, and then capability, let's call it, when we think about the clinical piece. And without, a strong playing in all 3 of those, it's not going to be able to lead the way. So it needs to be able to address each of those strongly to be a leader, a stronger leader than it already is in the global biotech ecosystem.
I think it makes a lot of sense. And Lauren, thank you very much for great insight. It was really my pleasure talking to you today, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you. Likewise, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.